Welcome to the debate. Today we are dissecting a fascinating and, I'll be frank, a somewhat provocative piece of source material. We're looking at the methodology behind the DJ SHAINER AI project, specifically focusing on the insights from episode 2, Creation, Emotion, and Community. This isn't just some technical manual. It's really a kind of manifesto that claims to solve what a lot of critics call the crisis of soul in artificial intelligence.
And let's be honest, that crisis is the elephant in the room for every creative professional working today. The central question we're grappling with is sharp. Does the framework proposed by the DJ SHAINER AI project represent a genuine evolution of human creativity, where the artist rises to become a director of emotional precision? Or does systematizing art into such a rigid workflow of production, research, and, daily deliverables risk turning creative expression into high-speed content slop? Efficient, yes, but ultimately hollow.
I'm here to argue that this material presents a liberating mindset shift. The DJ SHAINER AI method offers a way to restore meaning to music creation by moving us away from technical fixation, obsessing over plugins and compression ratios, and toward pure storytelling. It posits that AI is simply the instrument, but the human why has to forcefully precede the algorithmic how.
And I'm approaching this with, a heavy dose of cautious critique regarding the industrialization of art. While the method described is undeniably sophisticated, I worry that prioritizing the concept over the raw, messy, tactile discovery of sound and adhering to a relentless daily release schedule might just dilute the artistic value of the output. We have to ask, are we making art or are we just feeding the feed?
Okay, let's start with the core thesis of the source material. It opens with a bit of a reality check. The barrier to entry is gone. We are in a time where, anyone can generate a track with a few clicks. But the source explicitly states that the problem with most AI music isn't audio quality, it's a lack of intention. The argument here, and I find this very compelling, is that most creators are asking, how do I make a track? When the mindset shift needs to be, how do I make someone feel something?
I see the appeal of that framing. It sounds noble, to elevate intention. But let's look at the actual methodology proposed to achieve this. The source describes a framework where you define a message, then you do research, and only then do you touch the sound. It feels bureaucratic. It feels like we're applying a corporate workflow to the mysteries of the human heart. I'm skeptical because the happy accident, that moment you play a wrong note on a piano and realize it's actually the best note, is often where the soul of music lives. If we engineer the emotion before we even hear the sound, are we actually creating art? Or are we just executing a project plan?
I see why you'd think that, but let me offer the counter perspective from the text. The source material argues that without that plan, without that compass of an idea, AI generation becomes a slot machine. You're just pulling the lever and hoping the algorithm gives you a good melody. The DJ SHAINER approach says that to wield this technology effectively, you must be the architect. You aren't removing the soul, you are ensuring the soul is present in the foundation before you even start building the walls. And this brings us to the first major pillar of their method, the inside-out workflow.
Right, the inside-out approach. So walk us through that, because on paper, it really does sound like putting the cart before the horse.
It's actually putting the horse back in front of the cart. The source material is very specific. Creation in this model does not begin with a beat, a genre, or a synthesizer patch. It begins with a core idea. This could be a character, a historical figure, a specific place, or, a philosophical concept. The text explicitly says, sound is not the goal, sound is the messenger. And this is the key takeaway here. Stop trying to make cool sounds and start trying to tell a story. The source argues the reason AI music is currently flooded with technically impressive but emotionally empty tracks is that creators start with the prompt, make a lo-fi beat, rather than starting with a story about the specific feeling of loss on a rainy Tuesday.
Okay, but I have to push back on the assertion that starting with sound creates surface-level art. Think about the history of jazz, or electronic music, or rock and roll.
Often the texture of the sound is the meaning. A distorted guitar riff isn't a messenger for a pre-written philosophical essay. The distortion is the feeling itself. My concern with the DJ SHAINER method is that it intellectualizes music to a dangerous degree. If I have to write a thesis statement about a historical figure before I can lay down a drum beat, am I making music or am I making an audio book that happens to have a rhythm section?
That's a valid distinction for traditional methods. But remember, the context here is AI generation. The source isn't saying you have to write a dissertation. It's saying you define the emotional direction. Without that direction, the AI just drifts. The source mentions that once the idea is clear, the AI becomes the instrument. If you don't give the AI a clear destination, it just gives you the average of its training data. That is, by definition, mediocrity. By starting with the inside-out workflow, the creator forces the technology to bend to a specific human vision, rather than the human just accepting whatever the algorithm spits out.
But does it bend, or does it just illustrate? That's the distinction I'm struggling with. If I have a concept, let's say the loneliness of a space explorer, and I plug that into this workflow, I get a track that sounds like spacey loneliness. It checks the box. But did I discover anything new about loneliness, or did I just confirm my own bias? When you jam on a synthesizer, physically, you might find a sound that makes you feel a type of loneliness you didn't even have words for. This framework seems to prioritize clarity of message over the mystery of experience. It kind of assumes we already know what we want to say.
I'm not convinced that jamming is the only path to discovery, though. The source describes a phase that bridges this gap, which brings us to our second point: emotional precision and the role of research. And this is where the methodology gets technically interesting. The source describes using tools like Google Notebook LM, not for academic research, but for emotional research.
Emotional research. I have to admit, that phrase makes my skin crawl a little bit. It sounds like something a marketing firm does before launching a new detergent.
It shouldn't. If you look at how they apply it, it's about understanding context and conflict. The source asks, what should the listener feel? What internal movement should the track create? It argues that you choose tempo and instruments solely to serve the story. You might use silence or minimalism intentionally because the story demands it, not because it's a trend. This allows the creator to use AI with what the text calls emotional precision. You're not guessing. You are crafting a specific internal movement for the listener. By researching the context of a feeling, say reading about the psychological state of that space explorer you mentioned, you can prompt the AI with much higher nuance than just sad space music.
That is a compelling argument for accuracy, sure, but emotions aren't precise. They are messy. They're contradictory. The idea that I can open a Google Notebook LM, type in some parameters about conflict and tension, and then export a feeling, it mimics emotion, but does it possess the lived experience behind it? The source claims the listener will feel it even if they can't explain it. But I wonder if what they're feeling is the trope of an emotion rather than the raw thing itself. A sad violin generated by AI because the research said this is a sad scene is fundamentally different from a violinist pouring their own recent heartbreak into the strings.
But the AI isn't the one feeling the heartbreak in this model. The creator is. The creator feels the heartbreak, identifies it, researches the context of that feeling to understand it better, and then directs the AI to produce the sound that matches that internal reality. The source emphasizes that the listener may not always know how to explain the emotion, but the intention was put there by the human. The AI is just the bow on the violin. The human is still the hands moving it, just via a different interface, one of prompts and structure rather than physical motion.
I see the distinction you're making. The human is the director, the AI is the actor. But in this method, the friction is gone. And friction is often where the heat comes from in art. This research phase sounds like it creates a very polished, very coherent product. But art isn't always coherent. The source mentions internal movement. But is that movement simulated or is it earned? When you struggle with a bridge in a song for 3 weeks, that struggle gets baked into the track. If you solve the bridge in 3 minutes because your research told you to drop the tempo, you've solved the puzzle, but have you killed the ghost in the machine?
I would argue you've freed the ghost from the machine's limitations. You are no longer limited by your inability to play that bridge.
Which leads to the third area of debate, and perhaps the most controversial one: the pace of creation. The source speaks extensively about freedom through speed.
Or as I might call it, the treadmill.
Let's stick to the text. The source highlights that traditional production takes months, budgets, teams. This model allows for a new track and visual almost every day. It explicitly frames this as expanding what is possible. It allows the artist to build a consistent creative universe rapidly. This is human empowerment. You're not stuck on one snare sound for a week. You are building worlds. The insight here is that iteration is a form of quality. By creating more, you explore more territory.
I have to push back hard here. The source talks about releasing a new track and visual almost every day. That terrifies me. We are already drowning in content. Does the world need daily output? This shift from creation as a journey to what feels like creation as a daily deliverable risks valuing quantity over quality. The source claims this builds a creative universe, but a universe built in a week is a stage set. A universe built over years is a home.
That is a cynical view of efficiency, I think. The source argues that this speed allows for rapid experimentation. You can explore bold ideas without heavy limitations because the cost of failure is so low. If you spend $10,000 and 3 months on a track, you have to play it safe. You have to make a hit. If you spend 3 hours on a track using this AI workflow, you can be incredibly avant-garde. If it fails, well, you try again tomorrow. This isn't about flooding the feed. It's about the freedom to fail and the freedom to iterate. It's about the process being the product rather than just the final MPT file.
The source does mention sharing the process itself as a way to build community, which I appreciate. But there is a line where rapid experimentation becomes throwing things at the wall. The source asserts that intention is the quality control. But if you are maintaining a daily release schedule, eventually the schedule becomes the boss, not the intention. You wake up needing to feed the algorithm. Even if the source claims there are no algorithm hacks, the behavior it encourages, high frequency, constant visibility, is exactly what the social media algorithms want. You just become an employee of the platform.
I think you're conflating the platform's incentives with the artist's discipline. The source makes a very strong distinction here regarding community. It explicitly says, no viral tricks, no algorithm hacks, no artificial hype. The goal is organic community built through transparency. The pace is a tool for consistency, not for spamming. It's about showing up. And part of showing up is the visual aspect, which is the fourth pillar of this methodology.
Let's talk about that, the visuals, because in this model, just music isn't enough.
Correct. In the DJ SHAINER AI project, the cover art and animated videos are not treated as decoration. The source calls them integral parts of the narrative. They create context before the sound is even heard. They invite the audience into the world. This is crucial in a streaming era where music is often just background noise. This method demands attention by pairing the audio with a visual story. It deepens the emotional impact. It's not just a song, it's an episode.
I agree that transparency and visual integration are smart strategies, but I question the truth the audience connects to. The source claims people connect to the human creator behind the journey. But if the visuals are AI-generated, and the music is AI-generated, and the research was organized by Notebook LM, at what point does the audience feel they are interacting with a human, and at what point are they just fascinated by the technological spectacle?
That's the core of the advocate's position. The audience connects to the choices. The AI didn't choose the character. The AI didn't choose the moral message. The AI didn't decide that silence was needed in the breakdown. The human did. The source proves that AI doesn't replace creativity. It demands more human input regarding values. The truth is in the curation and the direction. The listener connects to the mind of the director, not the hands of the player.
And yet, the source admits that the visuals extend attention. It feels like a retention tactic. Look at the pretty moving picture while the AI music plays. I worry that we're substituting the deep, resonant connection of hearing a human voice sing a human struggle, the grain of a real throat, with a multimedia package designed to keep eyes on a screen. The organic community might be bonding over the method. Wow, look what AI can do, rather than the art. Wow, I feel understood.
But the source explicitly refutes that. It says the focus is on consistency, transparency, and sharing the process. People bond with the journey of the creator, DJ SHAINER, navigating this new world. That is a deeply human story. The technology is just the setting for the story. The narrative isn't AI is cool. The narrative is, look what a human can do with this new fire.
Perhaps, but let's look at the conclusion of the source material. It talks about this being a long journey and moving toward turning this into income.
Without sacrificing authenticity, the source adds. It emphasizes sustainable creativity.
True, but the temptation is there. And as we wrap up, I think that is where my hesitation lies. I cannot deny that the DJ SHAINER AI method, as described in Episode 2, is a thoughtful, disciplined framework. It is miles ahead of the prompt and pray method used by many. It brings intellectual rigor to a chaotic field. However, my concern remains that it over-intellectualizes music. By defining the message, the emotion, and the story so rigidly before the sound exists, we risk creating art that is perfectly explained but imperfectly felt. The source insists that technology alone is never enough, which is true, but I argue that sometimes the friction of traditional creation, the inability to perfectly execute your idea, the struggle against the instrument, is where the real soul lies. A daily release schedule of emotionally precise AI content is impressive engineering, but is it magic? I'm not so sure.
I see the validity in valuing that struggle, but I believe this source material outlines a necessary evolution for creators. We are moving from being technical operators, people who know how to play a chord or program a synth, to being directors of experience. The mindset shift described here allows a human heart to beat within cold technology. By prioritizing idea, emotion, story, the DJ SHAINER AI project proves that you can strip away the manual labor of music production without stripping away the meaning. In fact, by removing the technical barriers, you allow the meaning to take center stage. This isn't about replacing the musician. It's about empowering the storyteller to work at the speed of thought.
It certainly redefines what a musician is. It shifts the definition from player to curator.
Precisely. And that is the challenge left to our listeners. As you look at this material, you have to ask yourself, are you designing tracks or are you designing worlds?
And are you building that world for the sake of the art or for the sake of the algorithm?
Thank you for listening to the debate. We'll see you next time.